Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. My guests today are in the studio. They are writer Gary Cohn and artist Paris Cullins. They are the co-creators of Blue Devil for DC Comics and their latest creation, New Devil. Gentlemen, welcome to Comic Culture.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So, Gary, I guess I'll start with you. You were a writer at DC Comics, and I just was wondering how you came up with the idea for Blue Devil and how you and Paris kind of worked out getting that into people's hands.
It's a story I've told many times. Our editor for one of the mystery magazines was Dave Manick. One day when I was in the office, Dave said, "You know, Ditko's looking for something to do. Why don't you and Miskin," that was my writing partner at the time, "why don't you and Miskin come up with something for him?" I got really excited. Ditko, creator of Spider-Man. So I called Dan. I was in New York, he was in Michigan. We'd had marathon phone calls. We had one of our marathon phone calls. What do we do for Ditko? Well, what would Ditko like? Like a character who bounces around like Spider-Man. And let's do everything that was great about Marvel. Let's take a character and trap him in a costume the way Ben Grimm was trapped in his thing. Let's do armor like Iron Man. And we some magic like Doctor Strange. And we did everything. We created this melange of stuff. And what are we going to call him? Well, Green Goblin was cool. Let's call him Devil, a Blue Devil. I typed up a synopsis, and I went into the office thinking, Ditko's going to love this. He's going to love this. And we gave it to Manick. Manick loved it. He showed it to Ditko. And I have two memories. One is that Manick comes back to me with this news. The other is that I met Ditko and he said it to my face, but a long time ago. But in any event, Ditko said, you know, not my kind of thing. So now what are we going to do? Dave still liked it, we still liked it, and Paris and I had done some work together. You were like 20 years old at the time? 19. And I was almost 30. And Dave and I both kind of said, what about Paris? And that's where he comes into the story.
So Paris, you're obviously at 19, that's a pretty fresh face to walk through the doors at DC. So how do you get this plum assignment? What were you doing beforehand to get DC to think that you were worth this, up to the challenge of this new franchise? I'm
really not quite sure that that's the way it went, other than the fact that I think that a door opened and I had already been doing a lot of, I was an intern for DC, so to speak, one of their new projects for artists coming in the door. And so I was doing House of Mystery, which I was doing with him.
We did
so we had trolls and werewolves and a whole bunch of stuff. And some Green Lantern Corps being written by, actually Dan Miskin wrote one.
Did he?
Yep. And another guy, I think.
Kupperberg must have been in there somewhere.
Kupperberg's always in there somewhere. Damn that Kupperberg. But a lot of things on and off. And it settled in on that in specific. He says, hey, we're going to do a House of Mystery. We're going to do this story, and it's going to be a little different because it's going to take up a little more space. Usually it's like an 8-page story, a 10-page story, but this was a 15 or 12-page story or something, the first one. And drew it. They really liked it, but they, you know what this story needs? A couple more pages.
It just kind of grew, like Topsy. And Jeanette Kahn had some input. Dan tells a story of, I don't remember this, but Dan says, Jeanette said, never make it grim, which was our intent anyway, and grim was the way things were going, but never make him unhappy about being Blue Devil. So that was part of it. Paul Levitz must have had some input. Len Wein had some input at one point. Manick left and Len was our editor for a while, and then Alan Gold became our editor. So it went through many stages. That prospectus that I handed you has all the stages. It's got the Ditko stage and then it's got the next stage. So it evolved. And I think that originally it wasn't intended to be its own book. It was just going to be like a backup or a feature in House of Mystery, or whichever one of the anthology books it was aimed for.
So I guess the question now is, you showed me the prospectus, and in it you had a sketch of your idea of what Blue Devil might look like. In Paris, you took that sketch and turned it into the character that we're familiar with today. So I'm wondering, that visual inspiration, how did you come up with that iconic look for the character?
Well, actually, it went through a couple of them, and I'll tell you about the stage that's missing. He said it did have a lot of stages, but there's one more, ex-wife stage. In my head, I couldn't quite get that conversation he just mentioned. Didn't happen to me much. I just wasn't seeing him as a happy character, somebody stuck in a costume and whatnot. And he told me it's a happy comic and whatnot. And in the end, it was Len who said, he's happy, Paris. I had him in a big kabuki thing, white hair and a big flaming sword and all this other stuff. And finally, you know, me trying to adjust to what they were saying, I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, wow. And I waited till the morning and called Len. I said, Len, is he stuck in that costume? He's stuck in the costume. Yeah. I said, does it really work all the way around? Oh, yeah. It's got all the parts.
Yeah.
Oh, he's happy. He's happy.
Everything is big and blue.
That's right, everything's big and blue. So I said, I shaved the head, and I said, as far as I can see, he didn't do anything wrong. He may not be a specific commercial type artist, but all the right pieces were there, so I drew what he drew and just changed the colors just a little bit. And we got what we got. But in that terms of stages, it went from large to large, and then finally there was one book, 22 pages of House of Mystery, one Blue Devil story. And then my wife got mad at me for some reason, tore it in half, and threw it in the toilet and poured ketchup all over it.
His wife got mad at him in dramatic ways.
Oh yeah, it's amazing ways.
She was creatively dramatic.
That's right. You know, this is what kept the marriage strong. And then, and then DC said, "Throw it over." But I tell you what, make a proposal. I think we like this a lot. You know, too much even.
Dick Giordano once told me that that proposal was his model. That for years afterwards, when people were approaching him with ideas, he'd say, "This is the model for a proposal," which was very gratifying.
Yes.
So what do you put in that proposal? Because obviously you're trying to convince a multi-million-dollar organization that you are worth, your character is worth them investing a great deal of time and money into.
It was more than that. They called me up. I thought you were there. You know?
I might have been.
Yeah, I was there, and he told me to come in on a Monday, be early. I came in, and everybody was there in the bullpen, they called it, where they fixed the artwork and arranged it. And there was Dick Giordano, there was Paul Levitz and Jeanette, but there was two other people. One was the one who, one of the main executives of Warner, and one of Orion Pictures and something else. I can't remember what the other one was. And he said, I've showed this around to more than just us. And he said, this is the perfect proposal for anything.
So it starts with an introduction that's got to be bouncy. Same thing you want from a piece of writing. You want a hook, you want a first paragraph that grabs and asks some questions, and then you want to explain what the thing is about. Then you break it down. Character synopses, sketches, images from the book, and then plots. And we had plotted within anywhere from 3 paragraphs to 1 paragraph, 12 issues. So we had a year's worth of comic book prepared, and then all of Paris's design work.
So when it comes time to actually start making the comic, I'm familiar with the Marvel method where, you know, the writer is going to come up with a plot idea, talk about it with the artist,
what we did.
And let the artist go ahead. So you're doing that at DC, so you're giving Paris the rein?
Yeah, you know, there are artists you trust and artists you don't. And with Paris,
they were fools.
I tell,
they didn't know what they were doing.
And we still work like this now. I just tell the story. This happens, and I try to pump it up a little bit, and I use exclamation points. I tell an exciting story.
That's right.
And then maybe I mark off page breaks, approximate. And maybe I even mark off panel breaks. Maybe a page is a paragraph describing a page, and then each sentence is a panel. But that's just my thought. And I'll give it to Paris, and then he'll give it back to me better than I expected, and he'll throw in some things that I wasn't expecting. And now I've got to dialogue it. So we're going back and forth, and we're having a conversation. Sometimes when we're in the same place, as we were a lot of the time, Paris was in my apartment in Brooklyn a lot as we were working 3 o'clock in the morning, and Paris was sitting at the desk drawing, and I was kind of perched over him. We were laughing, let's do this. And that's how we did it.
Now, you mentioned that one of the edicts at DC was that this character shouldn't be grim. The book should be light and fun. But it seems and I'm sorry if this is a sore subject, but DC doesn't seem to remember that. It's kind of like, I spoke with Jerry Conway last year, and he said, you know, when I left Firestorm, no other writer has gotten the character right. And I kind of get the sense that's the same thing
It is.
with Blue Devil, and I think that's maybe why we're here today talking about New Devil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one exception. Bill Willingham on Shadow Pact, he pretty much understood the character.
I thought he did. Yeah, I thought he was.
Bill's a smart, funny guy.
It was smart. It was funny. It was unique versus everybody else trying to catch one aspect of the character. He caught most of it. He was this guy, multi-experienced person, and living a regular man's job, and it just went left.
But they've done all these stupid things. They sent him to hell. They turned him into a real demon. They killed all his supporting characters. I mean, they did all this awful, awful stuff for no reason, because nobody really understood the character.
Yeah, you guys, there was a guy that was working for you for one part of it and then went out of it, and that was for like DC Superman Family. I can't remember what the book was. He wasn't bad.
So,
but the energy was always missing.
So here's the genesis of New Devil. Paris kept sending me revised versions of Blue Devil. In fact, at one point we proposed a grim Blue Devil. We proposed Midnight Blue, where we had him in Coast City when Coast City was destroyed. And because he's got mystical energies, he's kind of reconstituted in the dimension of the demon that created him. But he's reconstituted in a warped, horrible, crippled, more powerful way. And he kills the demon and takes over the dimension and sets himself up as the guy who's going to hunt down all the menaces in the DC universe who do things like destroy cities. I think we sent it to DC. I think somebody might have looked at it, but nada. So I still have the sketches. I have some Midnight Blue sketches framed on my wall. So Paris kept sending me new images of Blue Devil. I finally said, you know, DC doesn't care. This isn't, and this guy doesn't really look like Blue Devil anymore. He's younger, he's leaner. This is some New Devil. New Devil. New Devil. Yeah. So we talked to our friend Dave Elliott, who had been our editor at Penthouse Comics. And Dave was working for, I think he was working for Heavy Metal at the time.
Heavy Metal.
And we sat down at Odessa Diner on 3rd Avenue, 1st Avenue, across from Tompkins Square Park. And over Blintz's, we told him about New Devil. He said, I love that. You work that into a plot proposal and I'll publish it. And that was 8 years ago, 9 years ago?
Something like that.
About 8 years ago. And step by step, it has become New Devil. And it's very different. But it's exactly the same, but totally different.
Okay.
It's all about attitude. No matter what happens, love and joy, happiness, and a demon or two. Keeps everything working.
It's a bouncy, dynamic character. It's got the same sort of visual momentum. It's designed to be fun, but every particular is different.
But that is the difference between, no matter what comes out, all the ones behind us, because even Bill Willingham didn't make them bounce.
Right. Right.
I didn't understand. I said, that's the thing they asked for us.
Yeah.
And it never showed up in anybody.
Yeah. He has the kinetic energy of the Ditko Spider-Man. And that's what you put into it right away. That the multiple image panels, for instance, where he's here and he's here and he's here and he's here and he's here.
That basically, we'll talk about it in science, that somebody can pick up 20 times their own body weight. So is the world bound to them, or is it, you know, it's a skipper to jump something as light as you lifting yourself off your toes? That's always missing. He never looks like he's fully present, because how present is somebody that they're way past their ability to do anything?
He's a highly kinetic character, and so the New Devil is a highly kinetic character.
I was going to say that you could imagine that someone trapped in a suit that gives them super strength, they're not going to be really used to that physicality, so they're always going to be sort of overdoing.
Well,
I totally agree with exactly what you just said.
Yeah, the suit is him, and we had postulated that the character was already a physically dynamic guy. He was an athlete, he was a gymnast, he was a wrestler, boxer, all those things. And when he creates the suit, it's designed to amplify all those things. And it's not, you know, we keep saying he was trapped in the suit, but he wasn't. He was merged with the suit. He had capillaries and veins going up into what had been the latex, but it wasn't latex. Now it's a thick blue skin, and he is Blue Devil. There isn't a Dan Cassidy inside the suit anymore.
So when we talk about New Devil, you're at the stage now, I guess, that you've worked out an arrangement to get the book published, and I'm wondering where you are in that process, and when we, the audience, would be able to maybe go to the local comic shop or look online and start reading the book.
It's a good question. It's taken us a long time to get here. At one point, I looked at everything Paris had done. I said, there's about 100 pages of more or less finished work. Let's pull a first issue out of there. So last summer he came and we spent 2 weeks pulling a first issue out of it and building a second issue and the beginnings of a third issue. So we've been revising that ever since. I've been dialoguing it. He's here to finalize the first issue for the next 2 weeks. And then we're going to the publisher we want to work with, Red Anvil, based in New Jersey. Dave Ryan. Hey, Dave. And Joe Martino are the publishers. Red Anvil's been around for 20 years. It surprised me. I hadn't realized that they've been publishing for 20 years, but they have. And nice looking books, very professionally done, distributed by Diamond. So we met with Dave about 1.5 years ago, and we did a verbal commitment where the three of us were kind of sitting in Times Square, sipping whatever we were sipping, and said, yeah, when it's ready, we'll go. When do you need it? When you guys are ready. So we're at that point. We're going to meet with him at the East Coast Comic Book Convention in May, and we're going to schedule it. So I'm figuring first issue sometime in the fall, and then I would like the next 3 issues to come out within 3 months of each other, so that after a year we've got the 4-issue first arc done, and we can collect it in a book and see where we are and where it's gone.
So Paris, I would like to ask you this question. Now, throughout your career, you've done mostly pencils. You've also done some inking of your own work. So I'm wondering, when you look at your work back in those days in the 80s, when you're working on Blue Devil, you're looking at your work now, what sort of processes are the same? What processes are different? And how do you approach that blank sheet of paper when you're getting ready to tell us that story?
No, it depends on what it is, and one of the processes that's missing that I used to also write. I was writing for the New Gods at the beginning, and that kind of changed because I was looking for a way to do that exactly, to write all of it, but I still didn't get to it. But I saw Keith Giffen, the guy who used to draw and write Ambush Bug, that was our rival, so to speak, and Justice League. He wrote Justice League. Somebody else drew Kevin McGuire, but then he went off and drew some of it himself for a while. And he had both the drawing and the writing, and he started off with basically little comic books, little storyboard comic books of his own to do it. So I started doing that, and that helped a lot. It also set what I consider my ultimate ambition from all of it is making my own company that we're doing right now. We're still thinking about CNC.
CNC Comics.
That's right, so that's 3 C's. Right, that the one, Harvey Kurtzman, has become my new hero, my new mentor. And he was really not so much a comic book artist, but a layout artist. Laid it out, and then other people would draw on top of it, and it changed the tone, but not the action, because they need the storytelling, which I find a lot of people are lacking. And I did storyboards for almost everybody, because here, Dave Gibbons, a whole bunch of people I did storyboards for. And attach a new flavor, or attach an ambience that wasn't there in that way or something. So more I was a layout artist than I was an artist. It's harder actually going back, because now I lay it out, I draw it, and I ink it. I'm trying to get to the place where it goes straight from layouts to inks. So it takes far less time.
Now, I find if I'm doing, I'm an amateur cartoonist, and I'm sure the audience at home is tired of me saying that.
He's an amateur too. Are you tired of it? No, I didn't think so. I didn't think so.
What I find is that if I'm drawing something, I can do a layout on full size, But if I were to do really tight pencils, by the time I go to ink it, the line has sort of lost its spontaneity. It's lost that life because I've worked it too much. And I'm wondering, is that something that you find if you go to full pencil and go to ink?
Yeah, actually, I was told that over and over again. Dick General, he says, your breakdowns are like magic. They're sweet. I could eat them up with the spoon. Those were his exact words. He says, but when you finish it, it's a concentrated idea. It still has energy, but nowhere near the energy that the layout has. You should find a way to keep as much of that as possible. In truth, never quite found it. I found moments that I had a lot more energy than I used to, but still, the looking for the shading, the lighting, and all that kind of stuff tends to destroy a certain amount of movement out of it. But what does help is learning to go from layout to ink. Find out your stress lines, because all the action comes from the line that does the most projecting. If you look at a Jack Kirby drawing, there's always one straight line, and it's where the arm projects or where something's being held up, where you watch the stress happens, because he's telling you this is heavy. And because he's telling you it's heavy, he makes an iron bar out of the bottom hand or just across here. So he creates this stress line, and he follows it versus making real muscles. He makes the muscles that makes you decide that it's true. And that's what you look for. You look for a line that makes everything true. Bruce Timm, he's perfect at it. He just draws this straight line and he draws the muscles against it. And it makes all the movement in the world. So that's what you do. You keep it simple and you keep it angular, and then you start to round things out. Well, art, just draw right over your original sketches. You'll keep most of the energy in it.
Okay. And Gary, I'd like to, I guess, talk to you about creating a character, because you have an idea on the page, and then you give it to Paris or whatever artist you're working with, and then they give it back to you. And I'm wondering how seeing the character and the physicality that's been brought to the page, how that may impact the way that the character exists in your mind and the way that they speak, seeing the way that they exist on the page.
It's stages in creating it, and the more you live with a character, the more the character evolves. And the character starts talking to you, but it's probably not till the second or third issue that the character is really talking to you and talking through you. Up until then, you're hunting for the voice, and you're hunting for the manner and the attitude. And at some point, it all wakes up, and you're doing it right when you're hearing characters talking to each other in your head, rather than you trying to figure out what they're saying.
And is this something that, again, if you're working with a character for a long period of time, I know like somebody might work on a character for 10 issues and they just have that story that they want to tell. And I'm just wondering, when you are working on a character for a longer period of time, how that might, you say you've been developing New Devil for about 8 years now, how that character may have just slowly evolved over that course of time as you become more familiar and you start hearing those voices.
They're not really talking to me yet. They're starting to. They're kids. And so what we're trying to access is ourselves as high school kids, because that's the pattern. Both the kid who becomes New Devil and the kid who becomes his foil are, I'm the bad guy, he's New Devil. And we're trying to access our 16-year-old selves. And I'm trying to access who we might have been if we had been friendly rivals in high school. And so I'm trying to remember high school too, which I'm not that far away from it since I stopped teaching high school for New York City 3 years ago. So I've done that. I was functionally in high school up until I was 62 years old. So I hear those voices, but I'll know when they've really started talking to each other. And it's sort of, in the first issue, we'll read as if I know that, but I'll know it better by the second or third.
And you mentioned that you taught high school and you're around younger people. And I find if I'm trying to write a screenplay or if I'm trying to come up with a gag or something like that for a comedy show, listening to other people is a great way to sort of, you pick up a little bit here, a snippet there of what somebody might say or the way that they act. And I'm wondering how you kind of build that toolbox, because again, dealing with high school students, even though you might not know who, Justin Bieber is or care, you kind of hear them talk about that. So I'm wondering how being around a group of people might help a writer actually be a better writer.
You have to listen. You really have to listen. I still teach, and I was teaching Othello a few weeks ago, and we were talking about Iago, who's the villain in Othello. I said, the thing about Iago is he really listens. He really listens. And this is why people open up to him, because he seems to be a sympathetic listener. What he's really doing is he's listening for weakness, but he's really hearing what people say, and then he's finding ways to shape it. And every writer who is good at characters must do that. You must listen to people. And as you say, the more voices you hear, the better. But when you hear a new voice, you have to really listen to it. And that's going to show up. Every character you create is a mix of people you know, aspects of yourself, people you've seen. The danger is when you're doing really stand-up characters, just stock characters, and they're saying the things that all those characters always say, and you have to look for a distinctive voice. Something that Dan pointed out to me in Blue Devil number 1, that there's a moment when Karen and Wayne are in the temple about to do something, and Wayne says something, and Karen's response was, "You think?" I wrote that. And Dan said, that's really good at establishing her character. There's just in that one word, that snarky attitude, there's all of that stuff that establishes who she is. And it just seemed to me to be the thing she would say. But it's because I was hearing her.
Well, I'm afraid there is where we're going to have to stop, Gary and Paris. We've run out of time. I'd like to thank you at home for watching Comic Culture. I'd like to thank the two of you for being with us today. We will see you again soon. Comic Culture is a production of the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke.